It's ListenABLE, a podcast about disability, hosted by Dylan Alcott.
G'day, Angus O'Loughlin.
And me, just a radio host who's able-bodied with a lot of curious questions.
Just a dumb, able-bodied guy.
That's
who
me.
wants to ask the questions that you think you can't ask.
Well, the other thing is, look, we've had some feedback is, why am I in this podcast? It's because when people who are disabled talk to each other, a lot of the questions go over the heads of people who would be listening because it's your normal.
For sure.
But for us, for someone who's able-bodied, it's like, well, we'll bunker down on this. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
And also, this isn't a podcast for people with disability. It's a podcast for everybody. Entertaining.
Exactly.
Humorous, emotional, to try and break down some barriers and change those perceptions. And you know what? We got one of the best people in the house to do that with us today.
Dylan.
A very successful man who I actually am a bit not sure I like him in the studio because I like to think of myself as the most successful guy in our group, Angus, you and I.
It's not hard.
However, now I'm not the most successful person in this room.
No, you're not. All the best looking.
What?
That's true as well.
Wait, am I third of the three then?
Absolutely.
Oh, please.
This next guest, when Dylan said, I'm mates with a guy, a New Zealander who lives on the Gold Coast, he'd be perfect for this. I had to Google who Curtis McGrath was, but since then, I cannot wait to find out this person's story. Curtis, hello.
Hi, how you going?
We'd like you to introduce yourself to the ListenABLE podcast.
All right, I'm Curtis McGrath, and I'm a one-time Paralympic gold medalist. Not quite as good as Dylan, but
they're coming.
yeah. And I'm a combat veteran from Afghanistan.
And what is your disability?
Whilst in Afghanistan, I stood on a landmine and lost both my legs. So I'm a double lower limb amputee.
Now, we'll touch on all that and your backstory. And I got to say, he was pretty modest there. Paralympic gold medalist. He was named the AIS Sportsperson of the Year.
I've got some tribute to you.
International Canoeist of the Year.
Oh, in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, he was. Plus, a Medal of Order of Australia.
Yeah. You've got we've been mates for years and you're a bloody legend, but you've got an incredible story, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But I want to talk about the early part of your life, because you're obviously born able-bodied in New Zealand, if I'm right.
Yep, that's
and
right.
And then moved to
Queensland,
Australia.
yeah.
So what was it like growing up for you as a youngster in New Zealand?
Yeah, pretty sport orientated. And I grew up in the South Island, Christchurch, Wanaka, Queenstown. So sort of great places for sport and adventure as well. So at school we'd have the subject out to recreation, do a bit of kayaking and mountain climbing and snow caving, things like that. Part of school, and kayaking was one of them too. So and I played rugby and cricket and got amongst it. Didn't do too much school, but it's one of those things that hindsight you would have, could have if you could change it. But got on with the sport and really enjoyed it.
Seems like activity and being active and sport was a huge part of your life. So obviously that's going to be affected when we get to the accident. But let's talk about your move into the armed forces. What was the draw to the army?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to live in Western Australia out in the wheat belt for 4 years when I was little and got my citizenship while I was there. So when I was coming to the end of school, we all get asked that question, what we want to do with ourselves, where do we want to go, what do we want to study? And a lot of my mates were heading off to uni, and like I said before, I wasn't too keen on more learning or academic learning. So I was looking for more adventure and outdoors, and I thought the army was going to do that for me. So I weighed up my options and moved over to Australia and enlisted as a combat engineer. So a pretty broad role. I can explain what a combat engineer does if you want. Yeah, so the official role is to provide mobility and deny mobility, and that can be anything from digging a massive trench to stop a vehicle going through it, or building a bridge to go over it. So demining, defensive measures, construction, road building, water tanks, water purification, medical centres, the whole sort of works of the construction side of things. So it's a very broad role, and it's a job that is required in pretty much every type of deployment there is. So combat deployments, humanitarian deployments, especially in humanitarian matters. We've got a heap of different roles and responsibilities.
When you were talking to your family, and you were like, guys, I'm joining the army. How did they react?
I think they were pretty keen on it. They saw it as an amazing opportunity to learn and get skilled up and get paid, fairly well whilst you do it. It's not really like an apprenticeship. You get quite a bit more financial reward for it. So And it's sort of expedited learning. Like you're only doing your courses for 3 months and then you're into the job. So it's quite quick, but at the same time, you're learning a lot of things and you're trying to get your head around everything, trying to come up to speed with where the rest of the army's at. But they weren't worried about it. I don't think they understood how dangerous my job could get in a combat situation. Maybe because I didn't know either, but at the same time, it was an adventure, and the combat engineering was a pretty cool opportunity.
What year was that you started?
So I enlisted June 12th, 2006.
Okay, so 6 years later, we go to August 2012, and an accident/incident that changed your life.
Well, before we get there, what was that feeling like when you first got deployed and you first stepped on the ground in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so it's exactly 6 years to the day that I enlisted, that I deployed to Afghanistan. And it was a lot of excitement, and at the same time, we'd spent about 12 months of specific pre-deployment training for this deployment. So it's quite a long process. We train more than we actually deploy for. So specifically, so that role of a combat engineer in Afghanistan is to provide the mobility. So it's out the front, there's no one in front of us searching the road or the route ahead of the patrol to make sure it's been searched or not quite clear, because nothing's clear until you drive a 15-ton tank over top of it, really. So we know our job is extremely dangerous, probably the most dangerous job in Afghanistan or the Middle East in that environment. But excitement and wanting to get in there and maybe shoot your gun or whatever. But that's one of those things that when you're in the military, you sort of train for this combat scenario, this combat theatre. You actually never really get to do it until you're in that environment, and that's the possibility of utilizing those skills. And it's like learning how to play tennis, but never actually playing a game.
I'm shit. I'm actually shit. So.
You're on this podcast and you introduce yourself as a double amputee, and that, of course, was due to your service over in Afghanistan. Let's talk about the fateful incident that day. Can you tell us what kind of day it was and what you were doing?
Yeah, so the conditions were about what I explained just before. It was about 11 o'clock in the morning, the 23rd of August. We'd been given approval to explosively remove this really large boulder that had been pushed onto a main road that was going up to a checkpoint, and we were clearing this checkpoint and re-establishing it. And the Taliban or the insurgents, we don't know whether it was Taliban or not, but the insurgents in the area had laid a lot of IEDs in the area, so we'd been finding a fair few of these IEDs in the days leading up. And they were very difficult to find. We were only finding the battery packs, which is off to the side of the road, not necessarily the part that's on the road. So unless we could see it and then find the battery, it was a difficult process. So I'd actually searched over this area the day before and just missed this device that was very well hidden in the ground. And the conditions on the checkpoint were quite rough. There was a lot of rubbish, and we're using metal detectors, so all the rubbish, there's foils and there's a bit of Coke can tabs and just bits of metal all over the ground that they had purposely sprayed across the ground. So it was a pretty tricky process. So I was walking along, and at the time I wasn't searching, and I was about 10 meters away from my mate Pitch, who was following behind me, and then I just stepped straight on it. And it's not like the movies. It's not like a click bang, or it's like a click, if I move my foot, I'm dead. It's instant. Like it's so fast that I didn't even register it. I didn't even hear the bang. I didn't see, my rifle getting snapped in half, my metal detector getting obliterated that was in my left hand all packed up. All I remember is sort of just coming not around, but because I wasn't unconscious, but just maybe a little bit of a knock to the head. Got up on my elbows. I sort of was like looking up at the sky, and it's dark. And I was like, 11 o'clock in the morning, this is weird. There's dust and rocks and shit falling from the sky. And I sort of get up on my elbows and look down, and I could see the blast crater next to me, and I could see my legs were missing, and the blood just like spraying on the dirt. And that's when the pain hit me, just like a freight train. Like I explained it, like getting hit by a car, set on fire and crushed at the same time. It was a very intense pain that I can't really explain it, because it's very
And we wouldn't be able to understand it anyway.
Yeah,
Even if you could explain it, we've never had that pain. That's
it's pretty crazy to feel it because it's so intense. It's not just like my legs were sore; it was my whole body was sore. Like it was incredible. So and as well as my role as a combat engineer, I was the combat medic for the team. So. Like an unofficial medic for my team, not a medic. I'm not going to claim that, but just an advanced first aider for my squad, and that was something that I quite enjoyed that role. It was really cool training as well, but it was not usually the case of us treating or getting other people to treat yourself and talking them through that process. So it was a very difficult process, and the boys around me were aware that I was in a pretty bad shape and could die, and so they were onto it. Like I was telling them, tourniquets and yelling certain instructions and getting the bandages tight and making sure the tourniquets were tight enough, and if they weren't, put another one on or tighten them up again. And I don't know, I probably should explain what a tourniquet is. It's like a seatbelt material that tightens really tight and stops bleeding.
So not only did your legs get blown off, but you first aided yourself as well, basically to
indirectly
to save your own life. When you realised that you were injured, could you see the remains of your legs, or were they disintegrated pretty much?
No, they were sprinkled across the sand. And later on, like after I got taken away and whatnot, but guys had to go and pick up my stuff, so they're finding bits of boot and stuff like that. So brand new boots they were too.
Oh, that's what you missed the most now. Was anyone else injured, or was it just you?
No, luckily it was just myself and Pitch that were on that area and close to each other. He just got perforated eardrums and a little bit of a cut and whatnot, and a bit of a concussion. It's sort of like he was walking like I was with the rifle in his hand and metal detector. Oh, actually, I don't think he had a metal detector, but his rifle got blown out of his hands and sort of spun him around a bit. And he was a bit dazed and confused, and it wasn't until after that I got taken away that we realised that he had a pretty severe concussion. Sort of wasn't making sense with his words, and so we're quite lucky because generally in that sense you've already searched that area, so you're fairly close to each other. But because of our fatigue, working those conditions, we've sort of separated and just were quiet and off on our own thoughts, and so very lucky. But and it was. I seriously wouldn't be here without people like Pitch and the guys that were on that patrol and fixed me up. And I was talking them through like IV process, the morphine. Like
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I've been a pain in the ass. I reckon I would have been. Shut up, lay down, go to sleep. But
so obviously we know that you lost both of your legs, but there was more injuries as well, more damage to you that goes beyond that as well.
Yeah. I had quite a lot of extensive damage to my hands. I was quite lucky not to lose my left hand. I had a very large wound that went into the tendons. You could sort of see all the tendons if you move your fingers, a bit like Luke Skywalker when he gets his new prosthetic arm. A bit like that, where you can see the ligaments and stuff moving. So, but I didn't realise that was buggered. So, I was using it as if it was all good, and not realising that I had burns and extensive damage or tendon damage and everything. So I perforated eardrums, and I had a very large wound up the back of my leg that if I was shorter, it would have went into my torso. But being 6'3", it sort of helped me out a little bit there. So and when the wounds that bad go up into your torso, they're pretty hard to stop. So a blessing in disguise.
Curtis, what was the moment that you actually realised the full extent of the injuries? Obviously, immediately you're helping your team
save your own life.
Exactly, and doing the tourniquets. But when was it that you realised, okay, my hands, my ears, the back of my legs. When was it? When did the moment click for you and you realised, okay, this is the damage that I'm going to have for the rest of my life, or that I'm going to have to work through?
It probably wasn't until I woke up in hospital,
right.
About 15 hours later, after getting medevaced out, that I realised that, especially my hand, I had no idea, and I didn't even feel it. And that's the thing with adrenaline. Like, it's just one of those things that, in that extent of adrenaline, it just fully blanketed out or blocked out the extent of my wrist and whatnot. But at the same time, I knew, because when I got hurt, I reached around on my right leg, and I felt my femur, so like the actual bone. So that wound in the back of my leg was really severe, and I knew that was pretty bad. So yeah.
Now, Steven Spielberg can write Hollywood movies, right?
Yeah.
But you can't make some shit up. Now, when you're getting medevaced onto the plane, can you tell us a story about what you said to the soldiers when you were trying to get carried on?
So I should probably give a bit of context of timing, especially 2012. The London Olympics had just wound up. We'd come back from patrols, watch TV, weightlifting, athletics, so on and so on. And, this is pretty cool. But in the ads, there would be like Paralympic promotion and being like prosthetics and, wheelchairs and weightlifters and all those sort of things and sailors and everything. And I was like, man, these guys are pretty cool. Like, look how fast they're going.
Thanks, mate. That was me. Cheers.
Yeah. Not athletics.
At all.
But look how fast they're going. And I used to love to run. So I was like, look how fast he's going. And these guys are getting around on, little bits of carbon and or a wheelchair that's, ripping around a court or whatnot. So it's one of those things that you see it and you're like, holy shit, there's another like side of sport. And I had never seen the Paralympics before that time, ever. And that's just through ignorance and naivety of growing up and not around a disabled person. Like I just didn't have that exposure. And the lads put me onto the stretcher and they're carrying me along, and I got injured just before the London Paralympics. So I don't remember the London Paralympics at all, just the promotion and then obviously after it. But I got bundled up, put on the stretcher, and we're getting carried along, and we're joking about losing brand new boots and won't be able to go on holiday and whatnot. And then I was like, boy, I'll be sweet. I'll be all good, mate. Like, don't worry about me. I'll just go to the Paralympics. It'll be sweet. It'll be all fine. I'll just get some prosthetics and go for a blad around the track.
Turn it up! What a story!
And it's one of those things that how would I perceive that even being possible? I knew my legs weren't coming back, but I knew that what I said there in that moment might make a difference to those boys, because that trauma that I was going through was not just my trauma. It was theirs too. It was my mother's trauma that was getting a knock on the door. It was my girlfriend who got a phone call at med school in New Zealand. Like, it just, all these people were being affected by what I was going through. But if I could say something that would maybe help them in that moment, that shit, he might be all right and he might be able to go through and come out the other side, stronger than ever.
Do you regret going to war?
No, none at all. No. I think it's a part of the military that is sort of frowned upon in a way, and I think it's a weird thing to frown upon someone who's willing to go there and put their life on the line to make the world a better place. And my job is not going there and shooting people and apprehending people and doing that and killing, maim and capturing people. It was to go there and search for the IDs in the road, so some little girl can go to school and some father can drive along the road and have a bridge to cross, the river in winter where it floods up, or we take it for granted here that we've got beautifully bitumen roads and traffic lights and police that aren't corrupt and we can move around, and that's not the case in a lot of these countries around the world. And if we're in the military, it's it's one of those things that we can get there and make a difference.
You have a beautiful partner, Rachel, who you're now married to. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you went to war as able-bodied and you came back and you were a double amputee. How did that affect her and your relationship with her?
Yeah, it wasn't until I was at hospital in Brisbane, I came home, and it was the first time that I was able to transfer myself from the bed to the wheelchair. And it was the first time that I realised I was actually now a disabled person. I actually needed a wheelchair or prosthetics just to move about and have a normal life. And for me, that was obviously a hard thing to swallow, but it's not just my pill to swallow. And like I was saying about the trauma, that was partially hers too. And she was there that day, and we have a photo like just before I burst into tears on the realization of this situation. And she was like the strength in that part of my rehab, and it was really important for her for me to have her there, and also looking back, she helped me focus on what I did have rather than what I didn't, and making sure that what's ahead of me is really, positive and healthy, and we'll get through this, and you're healing really fast, so you'll be back on your feet in no time. No pun intended there, but yeah.
Your new feet.
Yeah.
What was the support like given financially, mentally,
Emotionally?
Exactly, from the army?
They were amazing. There's a lot of horror stories out there about the treatment of the veterans, and there's the current situation with the Royal Commission into veteran suicide. But for me, I experienced no forcefulness, no apprehension, no negativity on it all. It was all like, what can we do for you? How can we help you? What do you want to do? And where can we insert ourselves to enable me? And I felt empowered by it, and it was something that I was surprised by, because I've heard all the nasty stories and how people were mistreated. But I think for me, that story of what I said on the stretcher about going to the Paralympics got out pretty quick, and the chief of army came into my hospital bed just as I got back to Brizzy, and so, mate, I heard what you said on the stretcher, because they get a massive briefing on everything and anything that happens. And he's like, I heard what you said on the stretcher, and like, we really want to support you doing this, and you just let us know if there's anything we can do to help you and enable me to get there. And I was just like, shit, like this doesn't happen. It's like a golden ticket. So I took him, held him to that, and obviously went down the path. And emotionally, there's obviously some dark days, and a lot of people assume that going through a trauma like that, or combat trauma, I'm exposed to post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's not always the case. And for me, I had a purpose. Like, as soon as I sort of got into that wheelchair, shit, I'm going to get my legs back, I'm going to rehab, I'm going to get strong and fit and stand up and welcome the boys home from when they got home from Afghanistan. And that was my goal. And each step of the way, there was always this goal that I was driving for, and that helped me, and I was enabled by the military. And they provided the psychologists, they provided hand therapists and occupational therapists and physios, and you name it, they're all there waiting for me. And the DVA, the Department of Veteran Affairs, have been really good to me as well, so I haven't really needed for much other than someone to mow my lawn every now and then. They're pretty good.
Now, one thing I love about you, Curtis, is you always wear shorts. A couple of reasons. It's more practical, but I love it that you also like showing people that you have a disability. You're proud of it. But could you see the way society looked at you differently all of a sudden when you had your disability?
Oh, massively. Yeah. And Australians and Western cultures were quite discreet in our curiosity, whereas other cultures are not so discreet. And indiscreet, I mean, being, they'll have a look and they'll look away, and that's it. They'll, but they don't, whereas other cultures, they'll just stare, and that gets a little bit, you feel a little bit funny about that. But at the same time, it's human nature to be curious, and the kids are the best because they've got no filter, and they ask what they want to know, and straight up you can tell them. And I read an amazing article on the ABC, I can't remember who wrote it, about the way in which a parent tells their child about disability when they see it. And the norm is to provide all these negative words. You're broken, you're crippled, you're disabled, you're not, can't do this, can't do that. And like the way I read it, I was like, man, this is so true, because you see these kids like, oh, Dad, what's wrong with these legs? And or is he a robot? And they're like, oh, don't say that, don't he's broken.
Or even if they get a smack, right? I've seen kids get smacked when they go, what's that? And then that, you know what happens when they go to school with someone like me or Curtis, another kid, they don't talk to them because they think they're going to get in trouble.
Negative connotations towards
exactly.
So it gets deterred from understanding. Well,
just breaking down that, how do you think, and obviously it's not a one size fits all, but how do you think parents should be approaching their kids when they do see somebody who has a difference?
Using positive words. It has to be positive, and saying like what Rach said to me, look at what I can do and not what I can't, and look what I have, not what I don't, and looking at those positive aspects of the disability. Or that's probably even the wrong word to use, but you know what I mean. Like, Dylan's bloody good at tennis. Not bad at basketball.
Good looking.
You can maybe add that on the bottom.
Very small print. Can I ask you a question about your? Because I know that you lost your right leg at the knee and the left leg just below the knee.
Yes.
Does it matter where you lose your leg? And I mean that in the point of had you lost both below the knee, does your life change?
Great able-bodied question, Angus.
It is, and it is a very frequent question.
Right.
And yes, it would change a little bit. So my right leg, I have a prosthetic knee that requires quite a bit of attention, maintenance. It's got a battery in it, so I wouldn't have to charge the knee because I'd have both my knees.
Yep.
I'd be able to go up and down stairs, no worries.
Because the knee's paramount to, like, I'm being dumb because I actually don't know. The knee joint is paramount to walking. Is that right, Curtis? That's what you miss the most?
It's trying to get back to replicate, the old Mark 1 leg that we're born with in a way, and it's close, but like it's so far away at the same time. Like I can walk in a straight line really good, and that's about it. What's
the mechanics involved? Do you charge your phone at night to pop your leg off and have a charger next to the bed for your leg?
In a way, the battery's a hell of a lot better than my iPhone.
Okay. It's not hard.
It's about 5 days worth of battery, so it's pretty good. But
what does it do?
The battery inside it, it's got 16 sensors and 4 microprocessors, and it takes all this information how I move into the microprocessors, and that converts it into valve pressure. So there's a hydraulic system and cylinder inside the knee so when I move, it thinks. Obviously, it predicts how I'm moving from that previous step, and it opens the valve all the way, so it swings right nice and free. Or if I'm moving slower, it'll close it, halfway and move it slower and things like that.
I just want to give a shout out to anybody who is 40 years and older who has a disability. Curtis and I are very lucky to be born in this age.
Yeah,
I just want to give a shout out because how tough that was. Curtis McGrath, one thing I want to ask you about real quickly, which is one of my favourite things. How tall were you when you had your real legs?
Exactly the same as I am now.
Are you sure about that? You sure you haven't juiced up your fake legs a bit? I'm saying, I think...
Want to dunk a ring, get 6'7" out of those
bad
bad boys?
You can be 6. You could go 6'7". Have you ever thought about going, I'm just going to be 6'6" for a year?
I could, but I'd be really odd.
It'd be out of proportion.
Huge, bro.
Have to be. Hey, what can we talk about how the prosthetics have gone, though? Because obviously your incident was in 2012, August.
Yep.
You had a German prosthetic company that first fitted you, right? Which at the time was no doubt revolutionary. How has the business changed and the progression gone? Because obviously it sounds like unbelievable technology you've got now. Is it different to what you had in 2012, 7 years ago?
The fundamentals of the prosthetics that I have on are the same. Just the added technology. So now this has Bluetooth in it that connects with my phone, and I can turn off and on the valves, if that makes sense. So it goes floppy, and I can jump on a stationary bike, or I can fix it so the valve is closed, and it fixes it so I can do gym stuff as well. So it's quite important for me to have that opportunity to do that.
And again, Curtis and I are not denying that we are the lucky ones that have a disability who get looked after because we play sport. But how much is that leg if you got it off the shelf?
So the set I'm currently walking around on is about $200,000.
Wow!
So they're not cheap.
And
no.
Do you know that when I wanted to get a wheelchair when I was a kid, I wanted a titanium one because I was pretty fat and it helped me get around. And my dad's like, "Oh, that's pretty expensive." And I would say, "Can't put a price on your legs, Dad, can you?" But actually, you
Great
can.
response.
You can.
You can. $200,000.
Hey,
it's cheaper than that. I'll guarantee that much.
Well, my first car was a Toyota Camry wagon. It was $2,000.
Sponsor drop there. Sponsor drop.
Yeah. Oh, what a feeling. But you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to think. Like my wheelchair,
it's more expensive
my tennis
than
chair
your
is
car.
$50,000. Like it's
Ooh.
yeah.
What about
I use a day chair at home, and that's like $10,000 or something.
Yeah.
Oh, so you take the legs off to... Oh, that's another... So you don't wear your legs at home. You kind of use a wheelchair.
No. Like if I'm doing stuff like cooking and doing the household chores, yeah, of course, because there's just the mobility and I've got my arms free, but and moving around. But at home, like being comfortable. These are not made to sit in. They're not made to chill in. They're made to walk in.
Yep.
Yeah.
What about when you're doing the after hours chores? The secret bedroom chores.
Oh, okay.
With your beautiful wife. Legs
on
or off?
It's up to her.
You would probably know the technology that is coming for your legs. I mean, no one would know more than you about what the future holds. What does prosthetics look like for your particular case?
So one of the good things that came out of the conflict in Afghanistan was the American military, and this is just in 2012, pumped $680 million into prosthetic development to develop the knee that I'm on now.
Brilliant.
So now that war is sort of winding down, but there's always going to be demand, but the necessity for providing, medical devices, prosthetics, wheelchairs, that, sort of get people back out into the battlefield. Because like the base that I left from, for example, it was Patrol Base Anaconda. There was Green Berets there, so American Special Forces. There was a guy there that got blown up just down the road from where I got blown up, lost his leg, and then he went back as an amputee.
In the war?
As a Green Beret.
Wow.
As a Green Beret. There was a big photo of him on the wall, and I was like, he's batshit crazy.
He's nuts.
He's badass.
But obviously wanted to get some kick-ass back.
So you get back, you rehab, you're back on your feet, your relationship's going well, you're right, I'm going to take these Paralympic things legit. When did you decide it was going to be in the boat, on the water? Did you try other sports? How did you make the decision?
So I dabbled in a few different sports. I had the opportunity to go over to the States and do this thing called the Marine Trial Games. So the Marines and the American military, each of their arms, have this disabled sports for their veterans and wounded servicemen and women. And I got the opportunity 6 months after I got hurt to go over to the States and do some stuff. So I did archery, swimming, wheelchair basketball, and I think that was it. And I can't shoot to save my life.
A basketball.
Yes, yeah. And then swimming was pretty good, but I knew it was like hard, and I really don't like staring at a black line for your life. That's pretty rough. Wanted to be outdoors and doing some stuff, so I started to explore some like charities that were doing some different activities, and one we were doing called Mates for Mates. They were based out up in Brisbane. They still kind of are. Their headquarters are there. We did a big kayak from Sydney to Brisbane and over 3 weeks. I don't recommend doing it. Just take the flight. It's much faster. Yeah, it's 980 k's, about 50 k's a day, and it was a hard slog. But it sort of, even doing that made me realise that I quite like this kayak thing, and I did it at school, and I was like, I'll pick up the paddle, and heard that it was coming into Rio and as a debut sport, so it was the field was going to be a little bit smaller, and the potential of doing well there was higher. So getting into an established sport, you got to knock someone off their roost in Australia. Whereas for kayaking, for me here in Oz, I'm the only one in my class at the moment. So it's a very small field, which it sucks at the same time, but it's good to get on the squad. But did that and got into it, and I won my first world champs in the outrigger canoe, which will be the new addition to the Tokyo Games for paddling.
Which you'll be doing both, kayak and
canoe?
canoe?
Yeah, that's right, and in Moscow, and did really well in Moscow in 2014. So I was like, shit, I'm onto a good thing here. And then right at the start of 2015, which was our qualifying year, and like 3 weeks before our first selection event, the International Paralympic Committee removed the outrigger canoe and changed it back into the kayak. And if anyone's been in a sprint kayak, they'll probably be wet because they fall out. It's a very, very, very tippy machine.
And you'd never really kayaked at this point?
Not
2
like
years
this.
pre-Rio.
Yeah, I'd done a little bit at high school whitewater stuff, and that's so different. Like the boats don't fall over if you're not ready for it. So yeah, it's one of those things that it sort of just jumped in. I was like, shit, I got to do some work here, and was doing 4 sessions a day, and got back on the horse.
You get picked. You roll into Rio. Now, you're a new disabled person, let's be honest. You're only 4 years in.
Yep.
When you walk in there and see 30,000 people with some of the craziest disabilities that you've ever seen in your life, how was that? How did you react?
It's awesome. Like, it's so amazing to see what's possible and how people adapt to their disability. There's even the poorer countries around the world, they were getting about on very rudimentary prosthetics and wheelchairs and all sorts of stuff, but they're getting it done, and they're top of their field and doing amazing athletic ability. One thing that I wasn't expecting was seeing a lot of people with short stature. It was just one of those things that you don't see that.
Oh yeah,
and
I wouldn't have expected that either.
My favourite Paralympic story ever. I don't think I've told you this, Angus.
Please.
You ready?
Right, go.
One of the things about the Paralympics is it uses more condoms than the Olympics. I think it's because people with a disability are comfortable with their own kind, I guess.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm in the food hall and there's a condom machine, and there was a male person of short stature weightlifter picking up his girlfriend of short stature on his shoulders, and she was getting the condoms out of the condom machine
Because they couldn't reach
because they
it.
couldn't reach.
Wow.
So he gave her a
Wow.
boost to get the condoms to go have some post-gold medal sex.
Right.
Yeah.
And you hear a lot about the Olympics and the amount of condoms they use.
Yeah,
so to
so-
say there's more at the Paralympics.
Equal to all they reckon at the Paralympic Games. There
All
you go.
right.
And there's like half the amount of athletes.
Exactly right. Hey, busy dicks.
So at the you introduce yourself at the top as a Paralympic gold medalist. So Rio was obviously pretty successful.
Yeah, rocking up there. I'd won the World Championships that year, so it's sort of like the seeding event. And people take it seriously.
The
and not.
Emmys to
It's-
the Oscars.
That's right. And we rolled in there, and being a debut sport, you're not really sure how to interact with everyone. And our events in the last part of the game, so that's good and bad. Seeing all these activities, but at the same time, you can't take your foot off the throat. You got to keep powering on and keep training and getting amongst it.
We were one of the last two to finish, kind of.
Yeah. I think we
Tennis
finished
and-
on the same day or
Yeah.
something.
So like it sucks because everyone's winning
Yeah, everyone's on the
or
beers.
losing,
Yeah.
and then getting on the beers, and you're like, oh, like
Still
not that
gotta
you
go.
want the beers,
Yeah.
but it's just the tension. Yeah.
I would just swap it each games, so you get.
It did
chance.
change around the schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine the bend you'd go on if you won in the first day. Anyway. So you get on the water. How you feeling?
Real nervous, super nervous. I put a lot of effort. A lot of people had supported me. A lot of people had, committed a lot of, time and even finances to get me to where I was. And I wasn't quite aware of how much that affected me, but I was nervous because of that. And lined up or warmed up, and I was super nervous. But then we come into this like TV zone area, and I'm not sure if you have this in tennis, but as we roll up to the start line, the cameras sort of go across each lane. This is Kurs McGrath from Australia, lane 5, lane 6, Marcus Swoboda from Austria, so on and so on. And we rolled in there, and as I rolled in there, all my nerves went away, and I was like, "You beauty, I'm on here."
Great.
And the day before in my heat, I wasn't really listening that well because we're right under Christ Redeemer statue. Copacabana's just over the hill. Like, it's such an amazing location, Rio. And I was amongst it. I could hear my mates, on the piss at 9:30 in the morning, absolutely rocket faced and having a grand old time. And they're just having a grand old time in Rio, and getting on those Caprahinas early.
Oh, yeah.
And
Good beers.
and it was one of those things that I was like, man, this is sick. And then obviously ready, set, and I was like, oh shit, like it's time to go here. But fortunately, I had a fairly my strength is in the last part of my race, so the starts are always going to be average for me, and I'm trying to work on that this year. But getting through the first part of that heat was pretty rough, and then managed to get through to the final, whipped through that, and lined up, like I said, in the TV zone. Nerves went away. I was like, I'm on here, all right, I'm listening, I'm ready, and bang, I had a pretty good start out of my grade of start. But Marcus from Austria, he's the 6-time world champion, my main rival in the sport. Really nice guy. It's hard to hate the nice guys in the sport, or compete against them, because you want them to do well too. So, but I was having none of that. And the difference is that with your sport, Dylan, you can react to your opponent. You have to react, otherwise you'll be upclassed. And whereas my sport, you can't react. Like your 200 meters, if you're reacting in a 200 meter race, you're obviously something's gone wrong, and you're not doing your race plan. And because we're in our own lane, we don't touch each other, we don't go near each other. We're just battling straight down the track, and it's all over in 41.3 seconds or something like that. And by that time, there was like a leader change twice, and it was back and forward, and it's so fast, but at the same time, it's quite a long time when you're stroking it out, and you're doing like 120, 130 strokes a minute, and you're going along. And then obviously in the end, like I said before, my strength is at the end, so I just powered through, and by the end of it, I'd finished like a boat and a half ahead of Marcus and the rest of the field. And when I crossed the line, I was like, yeah, sweet, like I won that. And I was like, holy crap, like that actually just happened. And I'd set out that set on the stretcher that I'd go to the Paralympics. I'd never said that I'd win a gold medal, but the obviously eye on the prize. You want to be there. You want to commit to that that degree of goal, and I'd achieved all for the people that supported me, for the guys that got wounded, the guys that didn't come home, and for me, that was really important. And I thought I was going to be excited and celebratory and joy and all that sort of thing, but I didn't get any of it. It wasn't until I was on the podium that I actually felt that I'd actually done it.
Do you know why you didn't feel anything? And I agree. It's a feeling of, everyone goes, why are you not happy? It's a feeling of relief, isn't it?
Oh, massive. And that's
all it
I forgot
is.
to say that. Yeah, like just this wave. It was just like, poof.
I didn't smile either. I'm like, oh, thank God.
That is over.
Yeah.
Like I worked so hard to get there. It's this one moment out of 4 years that you work towards, and that's over. And you're like, now I can breathe.
We do a thing called the Bowl of Uncomfortable. This is where we have people who send us tweets, Instagram DMs from listening to previous podcasts, and they have the morbid curiosity to ask you that they wouldn't ask in person.
Good.
This question is anonymous, and it is, do you believe you've profited off or benefited from your disability?
Yes.
But you can explain why. I mean,
All right,
it makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah, of course.
All right. Yeah. So, obviously, I've been fortunate enough to be supported really well, and then that allows my story to be promoted and people get around that story, and I've got sponsors because of that story and also my success. And I think that's not just me, that's the people that are in behind me supporting me and allowing me to perform well. And it's annoying, but success breeds success, and it's part of the thing of sport, really.
Boom, good answer.
We love that. CurtisMcGrath.com.au.
Hang on, I've got two balls uncomfortable.
Oh, please.
All right.
Whoa.
I know that you get looked upon sometimes by other return servicemen and women in a negative light because you're the golden boy. How does that make you feel?
It's a hard one. I think that it sort of relates back to my question before, or my answer before about, having the opportunity to do something, and I went out and did it. And if you sit at home and not get off your ass and work for the opportunity, it'll go amiss and you might miss out. And I think, I'm not world champion because I sit at home and want the world to give me something. I'm world champion because I get up and get to work and do it. I just come from training right now. So there's this unfortunate thing called tall poppy syndrome that is in a number of different aspects and industries around the world. And I believe the military is ruthless when it comes to this, and it's really unfair. And I think other people can maybe put themselves in other people's perspectives and take a bit of insight into that.
I'm not going to lie. Curtis got chose to bring the Australian flag into the closing ceremony.
Yeah.
So the best athlete performance gets that, and it was an honour to stand behind you, brother. It really was.
Yeah.
We've become good mates over the last few years. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you to do speaking, you do appearances, sponsorship, what's the best way to go about it?
Yeah. So I got obviously social media, Facebook, Instagram, Kurt McGrath on Instagram and Twitter, and then Curtis McGrath Official on Facebook. And then obviously I've got my website, just curtismcgrath.com.au, and then there's an email down the bottom.